Okay. Okay. Each of those topics has a chapter, so you're welcome to read the chapter when you can. But I will cover everything that you need to know in class next week. All right. So let's get to the main event here. All right, so here's the homework assignment. But more important is we were talking about supply shocks. And the example in the book is of a one-period temporary supply shock. And at the end of last class, I asked what I found to be a very interesting question is, what would it look like if the supply shock were permanent? Okay, so for example, there was a permanent increase in the price of oil, say. All right. So we know from, let's see if I can find that slide. No, not that one, this one. Okay, we know from the equation for the DAS curve that a negative supply shock would mean that V goes from 0 to a negative number. I'm sorry, V goes from 0 to a positive number, because a negative supply shock, which is what we're talking about, would raise the rate of inflation, okay? So the first thing that would happen is, let's see if I can find it, is the DAS curve would shift back, just like in the temporary case. All right. I think I want to. All right, now, at the end of period 1, as we enter period 2, what happens to inflationary expectations? Rachel, what happens to inflationary expectations? They go up.
In period 2?
Yeah, in period.
Yes,
they go up. What happens to the supply shock in period 2?
if it's permanent, it remains, and if it
means positive.
Yeah.
Okay. So this was the effect of the supply shock. What happens now when there's an increase in inflationary expectations?
It jumps again, like up.
It jumps again. Okay, so the first shift is because of the supply shock, and the second shift is because of people's increased inflationary expectations. Does everybody see that? Does everybody understand? Anybody have questions about that?
I just had a question on how the GDP and the inflation equation would affect this, because it has current GDP minus potential will affect the inflation. So would that drive inflation down?
Talking about the aggregate supply equation here.
Yeah.
Okay. Remember that that is showing a movement along the DAS curve, not a shift in the curve.
Gotcha.
Well,
Thank you.
I understand what you're saying, but the short answer is no.
All right.
Okay. Other questions? All right. End of period 2, we end up at point C. What happens in period 3? Matthew, any idea?
Would it start to decrease and return?
Why is that?
Let's see, because the supply shock is starting to wear off.
But V, no, there is no wearing off. It's permanent, remember?
Oh, sorry.
So V is still permanently up there. What about inflationary expectations?
Would inflationary expectations be lower now?
Well, you tell me. This is what we were expecting, right? At point B.
Mm-hmm.
What is inflation now? So we were expecting pi 1, and now they're actually pi 2. So inflation is actually higher than our expectations. Though admittedly, the jump in inflations from A to B is greater than from B to C, right? But still, at the beginning of period 3, people see that the inflation rate is actually higher than they expected. So they're going to raise their inflationary expectations again. And when they do, what happens?
It's going to keep going up until inflation expectations equal actual inflation.
Yes. So I believe the DAS curve shifts some more. Each shift will be smaller until eventually our expectations are close enough to reality that it stops. Okay, the way I drew the graph, we would run out of space, but that's just my bad drawing. Okay, when we end up, we will be at a point that looks a lot like C, though it'll be further up the DAD curve. Does everybody understand that? Aspen? Lillian, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Where's Charlotte today? Is she here? Oh, there she is. Okay. Everybody with me?
Dr. Greenlaw.
Yes.
So, why doesn't, at our original point A, why doesn't inflationary expectations automatically just go up anyway?
Because they only go up if people discover that the actual inflation is greater than what they anticipated. So that happens at the end of each period. They raise their expectations. First, they raise it a lot, then they raise it a moderate amount, then they raise it a little, and eventually they don't have to raise it anymore. Okay? Harry?
Yeah.
All right, so now here is the money question. The money question is, we are in a situation of stagflation here, right? We are substantially off below potential real GDP. So we have high unemployment, and we also have high inflation. That's stagflation. Okay, so I'm going to ask a simpler question than how to fix stagnation. I'm going to ask the question, how do we get back to full employment, and how do we get back to potential GDP? Because that's the same question. Do you understand what I'm asking? How do we get back to this line? Mar, do you understand the question, even if you don't know the answer?
Sorry.
Mar?
I said somewhat.
Somewhat.
Can you repeat the question?
Right. When the dust settles, we're at a point like C. Okay, that's the end of the adjustment. We're in the long run. It is an equilibrium, but we're not at potential real GDP. So the question is, for everyone, is that how do we get back? Okay. Does anyone want to hazard an answer? There are two good answers here.
Swing that DAD curve to the right.
Okay. Before I address that one, notice that that would require something exogenous to occur, right? So the short answer to how do we get back is we're stuck. The system itself will not fix it. It will take an outside actor to get us back to full employment. Okay, does everybody understand that part? Does anybody have a question about that? Joey, you got that?
Good.
Okay, so I'm not asking if you understand the reasoning, all the details, just if you understand the point. The point is we're stuck here. Okay, so it turns out, and this is the part where you're gonna get, you have a right to be mad at me. It turns out this is a trick question. What do you think, Jess?
I don't like trick questions.
I know. Well, I didn't realize it was a trick question when I asked it to myself, but I discovered that this is a trick question in the context of this model, okay? The reason why is, well, what's going on? Anybody know? What do we call a permanent negative supply shock? I admit this is a hard question because I'm asking you to think outside the box here.
Isn't that just a shortage?
That sounds more like a microeconomic situation, not really a macro situation. Okay, what I'm looking for here, here's what I think the answer is. I think the answer is a permanent supply shock really is a shift in the QP line. Think about what it says. It says that even if we're at full employment, because of the supply shock, we can't produce as much GDP as we once could. That's a shift in our QP line. Like this.
Would it be a shift to point B or to point C?
Well, I think it's a shift to point B because this DAS curve was what caused the shift in the first place, right? The V took a positive value. That was the supply shock. Okay, if you go back and you look at the part of the book where it says what happens when there's economic growth, the answer is both the DAS curve and the QP line shift in the same direction. So I believe this is where we would end up.
So if that's where QP shifted, why would we get stuck at C?
Because the DAS curve is out there because of people's inflationary expectations.
But that couldn't be remedied in some way? Like that's just...
Well, sure. If I was President Trump, I would just go on, as part of my daily news conference, at the end of being totally confusing about the COVID virus, I would say, oh, and by the way, everybody's inflationary expectations are wrong. They're just too high. Trust me on this. So I want you guys all to lower your inflationary expectations to pi 1. And if you do that, everything will be better. Okay. So if there was a unilateral downward shift in inflationary expectations, that would solve the problem. But I don't expect that to happen. I think the only real solution is the one that Jack mentioned earlier, and I think Sid mentioned it the other day. We've got to see an increase in aggregate demand, okay? If there's an outward shift in aggregate demand, say an expansionary fiscal policy, say infrastructure investment, though in principle, you could also do it with monetary policy, then the good news is we will get back to full employment at point E. The bad news is it's going to cost us higher inflation. And that's a problem. But that's the reality.
So how to get out of a shortage in stuff is to buy more stuff.
Well, yeah.
Huh.
But the problem of that is it pushes prices up. That's just the consequence. Okay. Again, if we're at point E, if we could persuade people to lower their inflationary expectations, it would bring us back down to here. But why stop there? Why not go all the way back down to here? Remember, in the long run, real GDP, real potential GDP is consistent with any level of inflation that matches people's expectations. Okay, now you guys are getting really quiet, which makes me nervous. So, do you get this?
If we shift the DAD curve, won't that cause inflationary expectations to rise again?
It depends. It depends on which way we go. What if now we contract the economy? You know, we wait a year and then we contract the economy, we create a recession, and that brings inflation down and it brings inflationary expectations down, and then we do it again, and we do it again, and we do it as long as we want to until we get the inflation rate down to what we want it to be. Yes, that will cost us periods of unemployment, but that's the only way we can get inflation back down. This is exactly what we went through in 1982. The problem here is that a negative supply shock is really bad. There's no silver lining to a negative supply shock. It creates unemployment, it may reduce potential real GDP, and it raises the rate of inflation. It's just bad. Avoid it if at all possible. All right. Any questions? Bo, does this make sense to you? Good. All right. Now, it's not obvious to me where we're going to end up because there are too many moving parts. There are too many independent actors. Okay. It's for this reason that models like this are typically analyzed using simulation methods. Forecasting. Okay, rather than try to solve them analytically, they don't have a unique analytical solution. So they run through, so economists at the Fed would run through different scenarios and try to see if we do this, this is where we'll end up. If we do this, this is where we'll end up. Okay, so where do we want to end up? What's the best destination? And then what do we have to do to get there? Well, the model can tell you that.
So a question about the DAD shift. How would that be caused? Like what variable would we mess with?
A decrease, it would be a demand shock. So it's that little E variable epsilon. A negative value of epsilon would reduce DAD. A positive value would shift DAD to the red line. A negative value would shift it back to the black line.
But what kind of policy change could have that? Or like what kind of thing?
Increase in government spending would shift us to the right. A decrease in government spending would shift it to the left.
Gotcha.
Other questions? Jess, does this make sense? Good. Lillian? Okay. All right. In that case, we are now done with DADDAS. So one of the things I will do this weekend is I will upload the PowerPoint to Canvas so that you can have it for review purposes. In the meantime, we're going to move on to the next part of the story. Next part of the story is consumption theory. Okay, this is a lot easier. All right, we know that Keynes postulated this consumption function in the 1930s, right? C equals A plus the MPC times Y sub D. Y sub D is disposable income, so it's income after taxes, right? In the 1950s and the 1960s, economists tried to take it a step further, okay? Or to put it differently, we know from Keynes said consumer spending depends on income, but it also depends on this autonomous stuff. So what economists did in the 50s and the 60s was try to flesh out what some of this autonomous expenditure actually was. And this led to a set of theories called the forward-looking theories of consumption. Okay, the forward-looking theories of consumption are two threads, two sets of theories. One was based on Modigliani's life cycle hypothesis. One was based on Friedman's permanent income hypothesis. They are very, very, very similar. Okay, they're emphasizing different aspects of economic activity, but they're very similar stories. So what I'm going to do is we're gonna dive into the life cycle hypothesis, and then if we have time on Monday, we might do the permanent income hypothesis too. Okay. So what did Mr. Modigliani say? No, before we get into Modigliani, I want to make some general comments about these forward-looking theories. Okay. The first point is consumption today is not limited by income today. Okay. According to Keynes, you're constrained by your income. That's certainly the story that we tell in microeconomics, right? There's a budget constraint and you can't spend more than your budget. Okay. So what Modigliani said is that's patently not true. Okay. Rather, what he said is consumption today is limited by three things. The first is your income, sure, your income today. But the second thing is your accumulated savings. If you've got money saved up, you can consume beyond your income. Hey, Sable.
Hello, sorry I'm late.
Okay. What's the third thing that you can do to spend beyond your current means?
Line of credit?
You can borrow. Okay. So we've got saving, current income, and ability to borrow against your future income. Okay. Now, your saving depends on your past income. your ability to borrow depends on your future income. So the way Modigliani looked at this, your spending in any period depends on your lifetime income stream. Okay, so you can choose today to spend out of past income or to spend out of future income. You're not constrained to only spend out of your current income today. Okay, so that's really the takeaway from these forward-looking theories. Okay, just to give you a slight taste of the difference here, Friedman said, income can be divided into two components, permanent and transitory. Transitory is you win the lottery or you win a lotto ticket. You know, it doesn't have to be $1 gazillion, it can be $50, right? So what he said is people spend out of their permanent income, not their actual income. So when their actual income is greater than their permanent income, they save the difference. When their actual income is less than their permanent income, they spend the difference. So it's a very similar kind of story as Modigliani's. Okay, a little inside baseball here. Keynesian macroeconomists tend to favor Modigliani's life cycle hypothesis. Conservative macroeconomists tend to favor the permanent income hypothesis. Okay, doesn't matter really that much one way or the other. That's just what they do. Okay, now let's dig into Modigliani. So Modigliani said, let me change slides here, and I apologize for my artwork. Okay, like I said, I know it looks kindergarten. It is what it is. Okay, what Modigliani said is people's incomes follow a standard pattern. At first, it's very low. And then when they enter the labor market, it jumps up significantly. And then during their career, it tends to grow at a decreasing rate. And then they retire and their income drops. And then gradually over time in their retirement, their income declines. And so that's the pattern, okay? If you went into the labor force after high school, the jump would happen 4 years earlier. If you went into the labor force out of graduate school, the jump would happen a few years after that, right? The advantage of working immediately after high school is you get started sooner. The disadvantage is your income track is going to be lower than it would have been if you had stayed in school and gone to college. Same thing is true for graduate school. It takes longer to get going, but once you get going, you're going to be on a higher path. So it's up to you to decide, you know, which path you want to be on. Okay, so different people's income paths are going to be different, but they're all going to follow this kind of similar pattern. So Modigliani said, in addition, he said, people prefer a smoother consumption stream than their income. Okay, so like when you're in school, school's expensive, so you're going to borrow money to go to school and to live, right? In mid-career, you're finally going to be earning more than you're spending, and so so that's a good thing. And then when you retire and your income drops, you don't want your consumption to drop as much as your income does. And so, you know, if you planned it right, you can keep your consumption up there pretty well. Now, the flip side of this graph is the second one, the net financial worth story. Okay. The red line basically, when you're under the timeline, that means you're in debt. Your net financial worth is negative. and it goes down, it goes down, it goes down. Once you start working, it continues to go down for a while because you're buying a car, you're buying a house, you're paying off your college loans. So it's not falling as much, but it's not until mid-career time when you're actually saving in a positive direction, right? So at that point, your net financial worth grows, and then hopefully before you retire, you can accumulate enough net financial worth so that you can have a comfortable retirement. Okay, so it's this positive financial worth that allows you to consume at a fairly high level, even though your income has dropped dramatically. Okay, so does this story kind of make sense to everybody? Okay, what happens here when your net financial worth hits 0? Jack?
You're dead.
You die, yes. Okay, so in a perfect world with perfect information, this is where you would die, okay? Now, for me, my target is gonna be up here. My target is gonna be, let's see if I can get this to work. I'm hoping to look something like this. I wanna die with money in the bank. Why is that? I can't take it with me.
Pass it on to your kids.
You will, sir.
Okay, I knew you guys were gonna say that. Pass it on to my kids.
Also, you don't know when you're gonna die.
I'm not, yes. You know, some parents are generous and they wanna leave a bequest to their children, and so they wanna die with money in the bank. You're absolutely right. But Rachel knows what I'm really like. Rachel, say that again.
You don't know when you're gonna die, so you don't ever actually want to run out of money because at that
Right.
point you don't have anything left.
Would you rather be here when you died, or would you rather be here when you died? For me, I'd rather be here. So it's the uncertainty of the end point, which is gonna make me aim to have money in the bank at the end. I know Sid imagines he's gonna live forever. Actually, I think we should call you Abe Mujahideen Sid now with that picture behind you.
Wait, why?
Why what?
Why that name? I don't get it.
Because Abe is riding the bear, carrying an assault rifle. And so that is forever imprinted in my head next to your name. So you know, my first thought when I saw that picture was Afghanistan.
Oh.
Okay. So why the funny graphs? Because usually, and this is actually true, usually economists start with a story, something that there's a question that they're curious about, and they kind of brainstorm a little bit and they come up with a story to explain it. And then they say, okay, maybe there's something here. Let me develop a formal theory of it. So this is the story that Modigliani first came up with. And then he said, okay, let me come up with a formal theory that can explain these patterns in income, consumption, and net worth. All right, everybody with me so far? Okay, now, I like this story a lot, not this one, the one that I'm about to tell you. I think it's a lot of fun. And it takes me back to when I used to teach Econ 303. I did that for about 10 years. Okay. All right. Now, I'm going to skip over slide 33. We will come back to that. What we want to do is formally derive the life cycle theory. We're going to start with a question. Okay. what we're going to say is, suppose there are two periods of time in the world, in your lives. There is today and there is tomorrow. Okay? A more sophisticated model would have today, tomorrow, and the next day. It would have 3 periods of time, but I can't draw that, so I'm not going to do that. Now, we're going to assume that what you're trying to figure out is, how much am I going to spend today? What's my consumption today? What's my consumption tomorrow going to be? What do I know going into this story? Well, I know 3 things. We're going to assume that you know your income today, that's Y0. And you even know your income in the future, that's Y1. Okay? The thing is here, you can spend more or less today than your income, and you can spend more or less tomorrow than your income. So the first thing that we want to do is figure out what are the possibilities here. Okay? So let's think about this a little more. Let's consider our consumption possibilities. Okay? Suppose we want to maximize our future consumption. Okay? If we want to maximize our future consumption, that was not good. Okay. How would we do that? What would we have to do to maximize our consumption tomorrow?
Spend less money today.
Not only that, we would have to spend no money today, right? So if we wanted to maximize consumption tomorrow, we would have to say C0. Boy, that didn't work well. Let's do this. We'd have to say C0. I'm going to make this a colon. C0 is 0. So Jack, how do we do this? What do we do to get from today to tomorrow?
Sleep.
If you're consuming nothing today, what are you doing with your income?
You sponge off the state.
No, we're not in the UK. What would they do in Australia, Harry?
Live in the bush.
Live in the bush, exactly.
Yeah, oh my God.
Okay, now here's what I think you would do. You would take all of your income, Y0 today, and you would put it in the bank. And by tomorrow, this is how much you would have. You would have Y0 times 1 plus R, where R is the interest rate that you earn. Okay, to put some numbers here, suppose you could earn 5%. And suppose your income today is $100. Then tomorrow, your income would be 1 plus 5% times 100, which is $105. All right, does everybody understand that? So you have to go hungry today, but tomorrow you get to party. You max out, but hold on, we need to add in tomorrow's income as well. So that is max C1. Come on, there we go. Anybody have questions? Matthew, you got that? Matthew. Did Matthew?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Make sense? Mar, do you understand? You take all of today's income, you put it at the bank, you earn R% interest. So by tomorrow, this is what your bank account is worth. Plus you have tomorrow's income too. All right. Does anybody have questions about this? Because this is the easy one. All right. Suppose, on the other hand, that you're like one of my colleagues in grad school, and I use that term loosely. This is a guy, well, no, I'll tell you in a minute. You want to maximize current consumption. Okay, so for starters, your future consumption is going to be 0. So you don't care about the future, you just care about today. So let's push that over there for now. You want to maximize your current consumption. And so your current consumption is going to start with your current income. How did that turn into a minus sign? All right. So you're going to spend all of your income this year. What else are you going to do, Harry?
You're going to save none of it?
You're going to save none of it. What else are you going to do?
You're going to spend next year.
Say it again.
Spend every day's income. So spend tomorrow's income too.
Today.
Yeah. Oh, okay. No, yeah, sorry. I guess not.
Well, you're on the right track.
You can borrow, right?
You can borrow. So what you do is you borrow as much as you can against your future income. And as much as you can turns out to be Y1 over 1 plus R. Okay, think about what this means. 1 plus R is our 1.05. So your income divided by 1.05 is approximately equal to 95% of your income. So the way that would work is you could borrow 95% of your future income, and then the other 5% you would pay as interest to the lender. All right. So in the first case, to maximize your future consumption, you are saving. In the second case, to maximize your current consumption, you are borrowing. That makes sense. What does it look like on the graph? It looks like this. Here's your maximum consumption tomorrow with 0 consumption today. Here is your maximum consumption today with 0 consumption tomorrow. And then we just connect the points. And that line is called an intertemporal budget constraint. It's a budget constraint, but it's an intertemporal one, meaning across time from the present to the future. So the way this theory works is it says you can choose to be anywhere you want on this line, which means either you borrow or you save. All right. Any questions?
Professor, could you make the graph a little bit bigger, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
He says with more confidence than he actually feels. How about that? Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay. So these little equations are just what I wrote in the previous slide. So this is maximize today's consumption. This is maximize tomorrow's consumption. Notice one more thing. Your income endowment, the point Y0, Y1, is also on this line. It's somewhere on this line. If it was here, then to get down the curve, you would be borrowing. To get up the curve, you would be lending. Saving. All right, other questions? We're not done. We're kind of in the middle.
So going back to the two graphs where we saw the overarching C for consumption,
Yes.
does that get higher for, is that higher for people with more income?
Yes.
Okay.
What I'm going to do at the end is show the correspondence between this formal graph structure and my crappy line drawings. So you'll see the connection. But you'll have to wait until Monday to do that. All right, we are out of time. Have a great weekend. Work on your macro homework. Think about the final. Rest, relax. Enjoy the warm weather as it warms up on Sunday. And let me know if you have questions.
When is the final going to be at?
Wednesday. Wednesday during finals week.
Okay.
Okay. One other thing I might show you since you're here and I'm here. And nope, not there. Too many windows again. All right. If you go back to the course outline, okay, and you scroll down, what you'll see is more sophisticated models of consumption and investment. That's chapter 16 and chapter 17. Okay, and then the final exam is April 29th, which is the Wednesday. So if you need some extra credit, read those chapters 16 and 17 and send me a module analysis. I'm sure nobody needs extra credit.
All right, thank you.
All right, anybody else have questions? All right, well then we're gonna